Hello and welcome to Empowering Musicians podcast. I'm Michael Manley, a professional French hornist, arts and labor advocate, organizer, and writer. And my mission is to empower current and aspiring working artists by providing them with all the outside the practice room tools they need to succeed. I'm happy to welcome Jackie Leclair today. And Jackie is the Associate Professor of Oboe at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Can't wait.
Yeah, great to have you. And why don't you give us a little bit of a background about why the oboe and how you got into music to start with?
Sure, you bet. I'm not from a family of musicians, although I think my great-grandmother was a pianist. My grandfather was a pianist and organist. He loved opera and singing, but that wasn't really that much of an influence on me. I was lucky to go to really good schools when I was little. I went to Manley's Pebble Hill School, which is outside of Syracuse, and I've learned since then it's quite a good quality country day school. And we learned to sight read with our music teacher, like singing, Mrs. Robertson. I don't know how she taught us to read music, but I know she did when we were 6 because we were like changing parts. So like, wow. And yeah, and learning rhythm games and stuff like that. It was very progressive, I think. And when we were 7, there were like 8 kids in my class. We all went over to the instrumental teacher, Martha Lowe, and she taught us to play recorder the way, one does. And I just really liked it. For some reason, I just thought it was cool. And she wrote a note home to my mother recommending I switch to oboe, that she thought it would be a good instrument. She said I was a musical kid, so okay. And I pestered my mom, and we rented an oboe forthwith and got a book. And I took lessons, and I really dug it. I just liked it, like the way you like playing soccer or something like that. It wasn't like lofty or it wasn't about music in a sense. It was just like, this is fun. I dig it. And I got lessons with the then brand new, probably second oboist of the Syracuse Symphony, who was Pat Sharp, with an E at the end, thank God. And I started making reeds when I was 10, which is freakishly young. And I decided when I was 9, I made the conscious decision I was going to be a professional oboist. And I remember that because I didn't know those words. I didn't know the word oboist. And in my bedroom, I would practice answering adults' questions. What are you going to be when you grow up? So I practiced saying, I'm going to be a professional oboist, which is quite a mouthful, actually. So I did. That was my plan. And I'm 55 now, and I've stuck to the plan I made when I was 9 with some developments along the line. But I find that being a professional oboist, if you will, gets more and more rich and more satisfying and more exciting and interesting with every passing day and year. I feel like I won the biggest cosmic lottery overall.
Yeah, it was just like that. Yeah, I think a lot of us did have that laser focus at an early age. I remember being in like 7th grade and wanting to be a professional musician. I didn't quite know what it meant yet, but I was like, I love what this is, and I want to keep doing it.
It was a completely uninformed decision. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's we're cutting ourselves off from other opportunities because we're so focused on that. Yeah. We might be great like brain surgeons, but we're just all focused on that one thing. And I remember thinking like I did get to college and realized that I had a passion for writing, and I got a minor in English.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. That's great.
So this laser focus is sometimes a blessing and a curse in some ways. I remember
when I was about 18, I remember just having a thoughtful moment by a window in my dormitory at the Eastman School of Music and thinking, I never thought about doing something else. And maybe I was enjoying my English lit class or something. I thought maybe I should have considered something else. Maybe, have I been wise? And then I thought to myself, too late now.
Yeah, I think sometimes as instructors, and you're a professor of music, like my instructor was probably typical, but probably giving me some advice that was not great, right? Like, so I felt very pressured to go right into grad school to get a grad degree in French horn. I would have been happy to stay in school 2 more years and get a major in English. And I was going to Florida State at the time, and I was a state resident, and the college credits were really cheap. And and I look back and think, well, that didn't even occur to me, because you just think, well, I couldn't take any time off of this because I've got to do this.
You're just on the path, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about a couple of your ahas, and you mentioned Alexander technique and body mapping and the Tao Te Ching as influences on your thinking about the whole musician and how you develop.
Well, that's a lot. I, in a sense, as I said, in a sense, I made a plan and I've stuck to it, and you could call me a success, right? Because I'm making a living at it and I've had a good time. There's always ups and downs, but there have been stages, and I do recall that when I got to the Eastman School of Music as an undergrad, during high school, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I thought of it as my ticket. I was from a kind of a unstable, not very safe home environment. I started actually living alone right after I turned 15, which is illegal and not safe. So I was, you could say I was an at-risk kid, sort of charging ahead. And I had to play the oboe well. I had to get into all my schools. I had to get scholarships. I didn't have money. It was like an emergency. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and ran through all my scales before going to school. I often skipped school to listen to Nielsen symphonies and practice more. And so I was kind of a complex carbohydrate. And so when just to give you a rough sense of where I was coming from. So when I landed at Eastman as a freshman, I had the insight to realize, okay, I need to play the oboe now. I need to transition into doing it because I want to, because up until now I've done it because I had to. So luckily I had that insight. It wasn't exactly extrinsic motivation. It was like an emergency. It was urgently necessary that I forge a path that would lead me to a safe and secure life. So I did transition, and I had practiced so much in high school, if I do say so myself. I practiced so much. I didn't actually really need to practice that much. I had technique kind of to burn, which is not saying much for oboe. We're not technical creatures. I really needed my 4 years of undergrad to learn how to be friends with my peers, how to socialize, how to just want to be a musician rather than need to. It's a little weird, right? Is that a weird answer?
I don't think so at all. I mean, one of the things I talk about is I talk about my work and the fact that I'm often interacting with musicians who are in trouble, right? They're on gigs and they need help, so they call their union staff and officials. And I've rarely seen somebody get into a hot water in terms of like their job because of their playing. It was always because they didn't know how to be a good colleague and collaborate. And I think it's because we sit in practice rooms alone for hours and hours on end. And then you get to college and you're like, oh, I have to make music with other people now. What does that even mean? And what does that look like? So yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, and everybody's different, everybody's from a different background, and there's advantages and disadvantages from every story. It's what do you make out of it? The old making lemonade out of lemons and so on. So the Tao Te Ching, it's to fall in love with the process, to be intrinsically motivated, to have to go, like, I'm really interested. How am I going to learn this now? Or what's it like? I wonder if I can get it a little faster, or I wonder if I can get through that phrase feeling more comfortable, or what if I use more balance and I'm going to use that what I learned in my Alexander technique. It's just constant exploring and curiosity and discovery. And I think we're good at that as human beings. And wanting to win the competition, or having to sound good in my recital, or even pleasing my teacher, or doing what my parents want, or trying to get a job, those are really tough. Those are not, in my opinion, or what I've learned, they're not good motivators. They're stressful, So and ironically, we can all do our best if we can do better in terms of getting a job and pleasing our professor and playing well in our recital if we're just in love with the beautiful process and not focused on the end result. That's where the Tao Te Ching is full of incredible wisdom. Human psychology and educational psychology and all that is performance psychology, sports psychology. It covers that as well from different angles. That, since you play beautifully, since you practice beautifully, since you're healthy and exercising and joyful and have good relationships and do smart practice and, thinking about harmony and melody and everything else, and it's not about me, it's about everything else, that, well, of course you win the job. Of course you play well in your recital. Of course everyone loves what you do. So it's just one of those great, wise contradictions in life that, the master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. So
That's
to
really
not think at all about being great. But then of course I'm great, but I'm not trying to be great.
Yeah, that mindset work is really important. And it reminds me of like a lot of what Eckhart Tolle writes about and talks about is like killing the ego. And, that's very related to what you're talking about. And I found that like, if you're an actor or a performer and you are focused on winning a job or an audition, you're just going to be driven mad, right? Because even the best players are going to lose half of their auditions or more. So you have to go in, I think, as you're saying, like with this idea that I'm here to make music versus I'm here to win, because you can't control that outcome. But what you can control is how you feel about what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's more and more books and booklets. Like Rochelle Jenkins wrote one, the audition playbook. What is his name? Chip Heath, the bassist. He wrote, How to Win the Audition. Of course, Don Green is full of it, and he has a brand new book. I've got it right here. How to build your own hero, something like that. First book in 20 years. This advice is out there, but how can we actually live it? How can we walk through it every day? How can we actually feel that way? That's a big challenge for a lot of people. And some people are built so that they can just, I'm going to get this job, I'm going to work really hard, and boom, they get the job. Sure, that does happen. But but then, are you happy in the job? That's maybe so, but that's a whole different thing. So I'm really happy that the community versus 50 years ago, none of this was available. I mean, the Tao Te Ching was available, but and when Herigel published that in, I think it was 1948, I think North American and European classical musicians were some of the first people to latch onto it. Because educated musicians, especially European and the Jewish population who came here, they brought a lot of deep education with them, and they knew about Eastern philosophy. And so they would require their piano and violin and oboe students to read Zen and the Art of Archery, right? Wow. Starting in the late 40s. Like, yes, this is it. Yes. And being free from desire. Yes, that's how you perfect your Mozart concerto, oddly enough. So classical musicians have a long, rich history of embracing those philosophies. And I'm just really delighted that now today in the 2020s, it's just out there. There's so much great stuff out there. It's almost just like a map to feeling successful. If you just follow the map, it's almost like that. That wasn't available when you and I were. Not as available when you and I were kids. I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance when I was 16 years old because my oboe teacher told me to. So
that's great. I think I know about the Tao Te Ching. I want to say through the music of John Cage because he used a lot of And I've never read it though, but I know of it, so I need to read that.
He used the I Ching more, I think. I Ching, Tao Te Ching. Yeah, and there's different translations of it, but anyway, it's Zen philosophy is definitely out there, and you can find it for free online now. So,
my great example of detaching from an outcome has to do with the one audition where I played the best. I actually showed up to the wrong place for the audition, and for some reason I thought it was at Carnegie Hall, and it was at the New York State Theater. So I get this call from the orchestra manager, and I rush over there, and I already think that they obviously think that I'm touched in the head and mentally not there. And there's no way that I'm going to win this audition because they already think I'm an idiot, right? And I went in and I just played really well because I thought the game was over before I started. But
it's very freeing. Yeah, it's very freeing.
It really is.
I remember, I forget what exact, but the solo English horn of the Cleveland Orchestra, Robert Walters. We used to freelance in New York City together. We're friendly. And I remember him, he was on some sort of online thing like this, and he was saying that it was only when he stopped, I think I can paraphrase what he said. I think Robert Walters said that when he stopped trying to win auditions is when he started doing well in auditions. He said that the very same thing. I think it was early in the pandemic, but I remember thinking, yep, there you go, yep. And when the one time I won an orchestra job when I was 24, and I thought I wanted an orchestra job, turns out I didn't. But the one time I won an orchestra job for the Orchestra in Oviedo, Spain, I didn't really prepare for it. It was a free audition. They were auditioning in Madrid and London and in Eastern Europe and Russia and Ukraine and New York. They were just building a whole brand new orchestra, like all 65 people, brand new.
Wow.
Right. And so I just totally showed up at Manny's, or not Manny's, what is it? Not Manny's. A studio in Midtown New York, and just banged through every excerpt. I've been practicing for years and years, and I just had one of those days. I didn't care, and I just nailed it. And they offered me the job. I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, that's crazy." Yeah, but I had no weight on my shoulders. I was just bing, and I just had a good day, and there you go. But so how do you manufacture that? One important thing, if I could just throw in one little tidbit, sounds weird, but I do this for myself even now. I give myself permission to be imperfect. That's like front burner, consciously, it's fine. You do not, like, please plan to be imperfect. I find, as weird as that might sound, it's very helpful. It can just take that little devil off your shoulder. I find that helpful.
Yeah, and that's part of why I think looking at why we're doing what we're doing is so important. And like, if your goal is to be the best or to play perfectly, those are very ego-driven, external. Whereas if your goal is to serve the music or to communicate, that's a totally different way of approaching performance, I think.
Yeah. And I find it helpful to think I need to do my job. I need to play the role that is required of me. And it's not about me. It's about the role I must play to help bring this thing to life.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not. Even if I'm on stage alone, it's completely not about me in every important sense, even if I'm on stage playing a solo. So it's one of these really beautiful contradictions we embrace. It seems to be this, but if you think about that, bad news. It's really this. It's cool. Yeah, exactly.
So a little bit about body mapping and Alexander technique. This really saved me when I was on a tour. There was an extremely heavy book. It was a show called Miss Saigon, and the French horns just never took the horn off the face. Oh, and gosh. I was developing just some issues with my hands and just from just holding the horn all the time. And I found a woman named Barbara Conable in Ohio who...
Oh, Barbara Conable.
Yeah. And I got to take some lessons with her before she became, huge and everything. But she was working on an Alexander technique book for musicians. And then she eventually did her own body mapping curriculum. So
what every musician needs to know about the body.
Yeah. And I actually haven't read that book, but you want to tell me a little bit about how that informs your playing and your teaching?
Sure. For whatever reason, when I was 17, 18, I took some I took some Alexander technique lessons as a freshman, as a first-year student. Sorry, that's sexist. As a first-year student at Eastman. And so it was a little intro. I don't even remember why I did that, but I did. And years went by, and I didn't get back to Alexander until I got my first teaching job, actually, when I was full-time teaching job when I was 40 at Bowling Green State University. And there was no Alexander there. It's a lovely place, but it's in the middle of a cornfield. There's no urban environment where you can just go get, certain things like Alexander technique lessons. And I noticed, I'd been playing all this really, really demanding music, and the music kind of taught me to be efficient and to remain injury-free, because if you don't, you can't play because you're injured. So really, 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 as you're saying, really, really demanding music. Well, you can't keep doing it this way because it's not going to work, because you're in pain. So I learned by the seat of my pants to be safer and to be balanced. And I would get massages and stuff like that. But at 40, I got to the school and I realized, people don't know how to breathe. They're breathing like, and it's like, that's not going to work. And they're white knuckling their saxophone, and they're overworking, and why are you moving all like that? And without realizing it, I had become aware of this. And then I had to kind of reverse engineer it. Well, how does that work? So I started hiring Alexander. I knew Alexander, and I didn't know body mapping. I figured that out later, and I took some courses in that too. But I just started bringing people in to help the students and creating big events and getting thousands of dollars to fund it. I just made that a really big, high priority for myself because I just had the intuition like, well, if you can't take your air into your body well, and if you're not balanced, what are the chances you can play your best? Kind of zero. So I had enough wisdom at that point somehow to be like, got to get to the source here. And so that was 15 years ago, and it's just so abidingly true. It's so incredibly powerful. If you remove all the obstacles you're putting in front of yourself with good intentions, we're all doing it with good intentions. If you learn to play with balance and ease and power and confidence, lo and behold, your intonation's better, your tone is beautiful, or you have better, and everything's better. So that's just been demonstrated to me, especially since during the last 15 years, that it is just, I could tell you story after story after story after story of profound revelation and benefit. I just can't overstate it, how deeply this helps people in our community.
Yeah, I agree. And I can just tell you my one Barbara Conable story. I was really having a lot of pain because in the horn world, we support the instrument with our right hand. And so I was having a lot of pain, and traveling around, we somehow came back near Ohio, and I got to have another lesson with Barbara. And I talked to her about this, and she said, well, show me what you're doing. And I went like this, and she said, you're tensing all of your fingers. Stop doing that. And it was the easiest thing, but it was like, but what I love about Alexander and body mapping is that it's about undoing, which is, again, it's like, it's about getting the ego out of it and saying, it's not about what I'm doing and the effort, it's about what can I let go of.
Right. I mean, it's a very, very old saying in English. I suppose other languages have it. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Good intentions lead to all kinds of problems. So you don't get points for good intentions, folks. It's a whole lot of not doing. I've noticed, and when you look at someone who's an incredibly beautiful singer at a very, very high level, just to try to evaluate what's working well, very, very accomplished singers and violinists and clarinetists and so on, it looks like they're not doing much of anything. I call it like standing in line at the supermarket. They kind of look like that. They're not. There's a whole lot of stuff that they're not doing. In Alexander, they use the word inhibit. Just don't do that. Just avoid doing that and see what that's like. And it's very humbling, and it's very, very empowering. But it's hardly ever about pile some new technique on top of what you're doing and you'll be better.
Exactly. Do you know Stephen Kaplan at all? He's an oboist here.
Sure, I do. I've had him here in Montreal as a guest. Are you kidding me? Yeah, he's great. So
I'm going to try to get him on my
I have
podcast.
His books.
Yeah.
He has the breathing book as well as the whatever. His book is called Oboe Motions.
Yeah.
He's great. Oh, absolutely. And James Grody up in Boulder, Colorado. He's a recovering oboist, but he does the Alexander technique. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I've had both of them here as guests. You bet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that reminded me that like I've received some of my most amazing teaching and growth as a musician from people that didn't play the French horn, And
absolutely.
And I think about coaching with Tom Neifinger at Norfolk, or and just like you learn so much as a musician when you broaden your horizons and actually open yourself up to people that don't even play your instrument when you're looking.
Yeah, you mentioned Neifinger, and he played a lot with Ronald Roseman. He was my teacher at Masters at SUNY Stony Brook, and that was it wasn't any of these particular disciplines, but he noticed that I was playing with a lot of excess tension. And like as he did with many of his oboe students, he was like, because he was a Tai Chi person. He died in 2000. He lived from 1933 to 2000. He was a beautiful, beautiful soul. Such a gentleman, such a musician's musician, so egoless in many ways. I mean, just wow, so about what matters. And he had the channel of Tai Chi, and he developed. I think he developed that wisdom through that practice, through that discipline. And he realized, it's about not doing all that stuff. And so he shared that with me for sure. that I should have mentioned that at the very beginning, but now that I think about it, oh yeah, I was 21 and I had no idea, and I was very good. So in a way, the very good people are most at risk, because who's going to correct me? I'm very good. You need to learn, because if I hadn't learned that at age 21, so many years ago, where would I be now? I don't know if I'd be playing, because all that extra tension those chickens would come home to roost.
Yeah.
Yep. And when you're 21 and all plastic and working through it, it might not even injure you. Look at age 40, 20 years later. Well, I try to do that with my students. I'll even say that to them. I'm trying to help you, not so you sound good next week in your recital, although that would be nice. I'm trying to help you so that you're still playing 30 years from now. Because I'm looking at you play and I'm imagining you fast forward 25 years and it's not pretty. Yeah. So to try to build technique even when you're young and resilient, so that when you're my age, you're still joyfully free and powerful and balanced.
Yeah. And I think, people think of music and performance as like a creative discipline. And on some level it is creative, but we have much more in common with athletes than we do with, say, writers, I think, in terms of our practice. Because what we're doing is extremely physical, and it's an interpretive art, especially in the classical world where everything is pretty much, dictated to what we're going to play. And even though people look at us and we're just sitting there, right? There's an extreme amount of like activity physically happening inside our bodies when we're playing.
I sometimes have the fantasy that I could sort of magically have everyone feel what I'm feeling. Like, boy, would you be shocked at what I'm doing over here? I feel like I look as though I'm just sitting here. Oh yeah, you try it.
Yeah,
you can't see it. You can't see it externally, but we're doing a lot physically. That's exactly true.
Yeah, and there's a lot that happens where people just, they might come to a Broadway show or a symphony and they'll just see people just going on stage playing, and it's like, well, that looks like an easy job. They're only working 2 hours tonight or whatever. And you realize that like there's 10,000 hours that go into being able to do that 2 hours. And that's another thing. It's like athletics. It's like you see the tip of the pyramid in a football game or in a gymnastics meet, but like there's all this other practice that's gone into it behind it that nobody's aware of, to get to that level.
Yeah. I mean, when someone's playing violin really, really well, looks like a snap. Anybody could do that.
Yeah.
No, it's really, really challenging. It's like a Romanian gymnast doing triple flips. Like, oh, I'm sure I could do that. That looks really easy. It's because they've worked for their whole lives to do that and make it seem effortless. Yeah. So, yeah. So to unpack that and keep it beautiful, Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you highlighted a quote, which I don't know who the quote's from, but this is so important. You said, "Act without doing, work without effort."
Yeah, that's the Tao Te Ching. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it relates to the book Flow by Chick Benzanali, who passed away recently. That's less scientifically, or not even at all scientifically proven, but it's definitely a thing, that concept of flow that people in the whole wide world value, of being invested in the quality of the experience. That's the best place to be. And which is easy to say, but how do I get there? Part of it is just through really being very well prepared. So it's but the Tao Te Ching, I mean, it's like looks like little poems, but you can read it every day of your life for 75 years and still get something out of it. I think it's so rich.
That's great. I'm definitely going to check that out. In our closing minutes here, I just wanted we were going to talk a lot about the future of music, and we're going to have to do that in a future episode. I hope you come back.
I would love to.
Because I think that's a really good topic, but we got really involved in this process work and the mindset work, which I think is really important. But you mentioned the fact that you learned from an early age, and a lot of us, we pursue these instruments, especially orchestral instruments, and we think, oh my gosh, the Cleveland Orchestra, the Philadelphia Orchestra, like we're so focused on playing that standard orchestral repertoire of Beethoven and Brahms and Strauss, and you had no interest in that, or you discovered you didn't really have an interest in that. So when it comes to your performance career, what music are you playing, and what does excite you as a performer?
I think actually I'm actually really omnivorous. I do love. I mean, what's better than playing a really magical Beethoven Symphony Number 6 performance? It's one of the most, I mean, some of the best moments I've spent on earth have been in the middle of an orchestra playing. There's no question about that. I love that music. I just don't want to be in an orchestra for a living because I like to choose the music I play. I like to be in charge. Oh. I like to choose what I do, and in orchestra, there's talk about maybe transforming the structure of symphony orchestras, and I'm all for it. But this sort of top-down, show up when, how, what do you wear, what do you play? That's not for me, is what I discovered. It's not about the music. I love the music. But whenever I'm introduced as a new music expert. Okay, guilty as charged, but I think it's about playing with a sound that you like, that's beautiful, knowing what the spectrum of sound is, what expectations are. How should Brahms be different from Stravinsky? What about quarter tones? What about flutter tongue? And I figure, yeah, sure, let me just do everything. And because it's not about me. It's about what does the music need. I can do almost all, I guess, the techniques on a wind instrument, but I've only learned the technique because some piece of paper required me to. I don't sit around thinking up funny sounds. I'm not interested in making funny sounds, but if someone asked me to do it, like, oh, sure, I can do that. So I'm just sort of really omnivorous. I meat and potatoes, okay, but try Thai and Moroccan food. So that's kind of how I am musically. It's just to be, I talk a lot about the F word, flexibility. Just flexible. Can you do it this way? Sure. Can you do it faster? Yeah. Slower? No problem. Can you? That's just how I am. My brain is like that. I have the kind of brain that if you shift the paradigm and change all the rules, I get excited. A lot of people freak out and run in the opposite direction. That's just how I am as a person. Like, can you do it this way? Like, yeah, sure. I mean, not right now, but I can next week.
Well, that's a really adventurous, open-minded way of looking at it. And I can't believe you can flutter tongue on the oboe. I mean, that must be really difficult.
No, it's actually so easy that when I have a piece that requires flutter tongue, I have to inhibit my sometimes I'll just start flutter tonguing as an expressive thing unintentionally. If you do it the way I do it, it's really easy, but whatever, we all learn. I'm happy to talk about flutter tongue with anyone who wants to.
We're getting pretty far into the oboe technical weeds, but also double tonguing is pretty hard too on the oboe. And do you do that as well?
Yep. Yeah. And I have tutorials on my YouTube channel if you want to check them out, just 4 or 5 minutes, so I love sharing knowledge, or sharing ideas anyway.
Great. So people can connect to you on YouTube. What's your YouTube channel name?
I don't know if it has a name. I guess I should know that. But if you just search my name, Jacqueline Leclair, and flutter tongue, it's just really easy to find.
Well, that's going to be my first video that I watch when we close. So.
Awesome. Great.
And then you also have a website as well?
Yeah, Jacqueline Leclair, no dot, JacquelineLeclair.com.
Great. And you're on Facebook, and I'm also on Facebook if folks want to connect with me directly, or you can also join my Empowering Musicians group.
And thank you so much for doing that. I think it's really, really great to have the conversation and just have it on the table, and about injury, about making money, about planning, about what about this, what about that, to take it all out of the shadows and put it on the table. Like, let's talk about it. How do we do this? And how do we help each other to do it? And thank you for doing that for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really want to focus on the whole musician. And I realized in my work that I do, as a labor organizer in the performing arts field, that I'm narrowly focused on, the people connected to our organization, the American Federation of Musicians, and that a lot of them are not learning what they should early enough. And that I wanted to get messages out to maybe a broader audience as well. And of course, I would love for everybody to join our union, the American Federation of Musicians. But until they do, like, this knowledge about, like, how do we survive and thrive as whole musicians, and also, like, how do we monetize and make a living at what we do, and what's fair, and what does it mean to be respected on the job? All these questions, I think, need to get to folks earlier. And I'm really happy to have colleagues like you who are willing to share with us in this forum. And I'm going to eventually have a podcast on, I think it's already available on Spotify, and do have a YouTube channel as well if you search for Empowering Musicians. So I'm totally getting this stuff out there and working out the bugs because I'm not a very technical person, but happy to have you. And when you come back, which I hope you do, we will talk a lot about the future of work as a classical musician. This is a very sort of charged but exciting topic about what it means to be a classical musician in the 21st century. And that will be part 2 of our interview.
Fantastic. I can't wait. I'm excited about it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, Jackie. And thank you again for being here. And we will see you all next time. Take care.
Take care. Bye.